wherever you are watching. This is the big interview with me, Seni MK Marina, live from our virtual studios here in Seattle. The big interview today features David Kujabi, the former spokesperson of the Gambia Police Force, and also an author with 2 books under his arm. Our discussion today will focus on the security sector reform, as well as his 2 new books and the work he is doing at the Geneva Center for Security Services, Banjul office. Welcome to the big interview with me, David, today. David, welcome to the big interview.
Thank you very much, Seni, for having me. And I am saying hello to everyone who is following us.
Yes, thank you very much. Let's go straight to the point. David Kujabi, for those watching for the first time, tell us briefly who David Kujabi is.
You've probably asked me the most difficult question. David Kujabi is Gambian, born and bred partly in the Biam, Nyongon, and also Katong. So I have experienced the cultures of these different places. First, I did my education in these 3 different places. Went to high school at Fatima Senior Secondary School. I taught for 2 years before going into the Gambia College, and then after graduation, I taught for another 2 years. Then went to university where I did my bachelor's degrees in English and sociology. Then in 2010, I joined the Gambia Police Force as a cadet officer. I'm still a member of the Gambia Police Force. I received training both in the Gambia and in Ghana, the Ghana Police College, and served as police PRO for 2 stints. 2 stints, given the fact that I first became police PRO in 2012, August 2012, until 2015, when I was opportune to go on a peacekeeping mission in Darfur. When I returned in 2017, I became PRO again. So the first stint was under the Jammeh regime, and then the second stint was under the President Adama Barrow regime. So I've had an experience of serving under both regimes. And well, I dare say I survived quite well. And well, yes. Now I work as a communications officer for the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance. And the good thing is that DCAF is supporting security sector reform in the Gambia. So I am still working very closely with the security agencies in the Gambia, especially the Gambia Police Force and the Gambia Immigration Department.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, David Kujabi, for that brief introduction about who you are and the work you have done. David, you still work with the Gambia Police Force in your capacity as a communication officer for DCAF office, Banjul. David, you also serve under both government, a very difficult government of former President Yahya Jammeh, and then you also serve briefly as the police spokesperson. Give us a contrast of serving under 2 distinct government of Adama Barrow and former President Yahya Jammeh.
You know, I'm pretty sure a lot of the audience will be surprised to hear that. But I think I had an easier time during the Jammeh regime than under the Barrow regime. But I'll explain. For me, I was the kind of person who tried to do what was best for Gambia. So under my stint as police PRO, I focused on what was best for the Gambia. And my relationship with the media, the Gambia press especially, was very quite cordial. I only talked about the things I was really sure about. I reported on the things I was sure about, and if there were any things that were sensitive, I tried to avoid it. So well, I navigated quite well and did not have challenges. And back then also, journalists were quite cautious as to what they were asking. So I didn't have to worry too much about journalists probing. So it was not easy, yes, but compared to after the change of government, that time when we were.
But before you go to after the change, David, you said you find your work a bit relaxed under Yahya Jammeh, and this is a very dictatorial government. If you, some will disagree, but how do you navigate? Because these are situations where you are forced to come and face the press and tell them stuff that are not happening. But how do you navigate that?
Um, to be quite honest with you, like I said, if I wasn't sure about anything, I didn't get into it. That was one thing. Secondly, I also made sure that whatever I reported was based on the truth. When I look back, I can't say there was a time when I had to defend something that wasn't true, because if I couldn't tell the truth, I wouldn't go into it, and nobody would push me into it, and that was what helped me. So anytime I came out, I was really sure about what I was talking about. And if there were instances, which then yes, of course, there were instances when coming out would have been disastrous for me, because what I was expected to communicate and what was actually prevailing were different. I made myself unavailable. I mean, in fact, I have told my authorities on some occasions that, well, if I can't tell the truth, I can't go up there, and they quite respected that. And to be quite honest, my management was quite supportive. They didn't force me into saying things I didn't want to say, and if I was expected to say things I was not comfortable with, I stayed back, and that was why I mean it was easy for me. I didn't allow myself to be drawn into what was prevalent in the system then. People just doing it because they felt, well, that was what it meant to be loyal or patriotic. For me, my understanding was clearly that I owed a responsibility to the Gambian people. The work I was doing was being paid for by the Gambian people. So my accountability was to them. And bearing that in
Even
mind,
even even under that difficult circumstances.
of course, of course, I don't know. Maybe it was youthfulness or things like that. But I held on to what I believed, because I mean, I honestly speaking, I did not face challenges. I just believed in the truth and then followed through. And because I believed that maybe I had God's guidance or God's blessings, I did not do anything untoward. That was why there has never been an instance where anybody had called me out, or for anything. So I just believed in the truth, and I got blessed throughout the whole course.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's talk about, when there was democratic change in 2016, 2017, the Adama Barrow government came in. You were still the spokesperson. Can you tell us your experience working with the coalition government then after 22 years of dictatorship?
Yes, in 2017 when I returned in October, I returned in October, and I was redeployed back as the police PRO, and everybody in the Gambia was excited. That was the wave of the new Gambia. The Gambia has decided the new Gambia, and everybody was excited that we have escaped the clutches of Jammeh, 22 years of authoritarian, if you like, dictatorial regime. And so Gambians were now beginning to experience what it means to be in a democratic dispensation. Now, the difficult part was this. For me, at that point, all of a sudden, 2017, we then started experiences an increase in crime.
Yes.
I think Gambians were had for 22 years bottled up a lot of emotion, and all of a sudden they had an opportunity to express it. And so everybody was doing whatever they pleased, whether it was legal or law or not, illegal or not. And it was really very difficult. Now, journalists were no more afraid to ask critical questions.
Right.
Okay. And because it was a democratic dispensation, you had a responsibility to respond. So was the difficult part. They were going to ask questions. And
Yes.
believe me, Sani, you would agree with me that after, from even as early as 2017, we started experiencing problems with the transition itself. Things did not go as smoothly as the Gambians expected. So there were challenges there that needed to be addressed, even by the police. I remember that because of the increase in crime, there was need to set up so the police needed to come up with strategies, and that is what led to the establishment of anti-crime unit.
Mhm.
Okay, so those were really very difficult times, and it was not.
So do you think that freedom, a lot of freedom for Gambians led to increase in crime during the peak of the new government?
I can't say it was because of a lot of freedom. I think it was the release
Oh.
from years of bondage, if you like,
Mhm.
or years
Mhm.
of inability to freely express yourself. So they were basking in the wave of some of freedom,
Mhm.
because all of a sudden the police couldn't arrest and detain somebody for more than 72 hours. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, the then called NIA could not go about arresting people willy-nilly. All of a sudden, somebody cannot disappear, and then the whole country will not be speaking out. So even at that moment, there began to be some amount of accountability on what the security service was doing. And if there is too much accountability at a time when we are still struggling to find bearing as to, well, coming from a state-centered security outfit to now having to be considerate of the human security needs, it was a quite tricky and challenging time, and that made being PRO quite challenging.
Absolutely, David Kujabi. That must be an interesting time for you, serving under both government as the police spokesperson. Recently, your organization, the Gambia Police Force, is validating a police bill that is meant to ensure that the police are accountable. The police, function in a democratic setting. Tell us about this police bill, how timely it is, looking at the current security sector reform currently been rolled out.
How timely? I think actually it is a bit late. I
Oh.
mean, it's been 7 years since after the change of government. I think the reforms we cannot expect them that they expect that they would happen overnight. But it is also gratifying that at least some efforts are being made in coming up with a new police bill that not only addresses the current contemporary security needs for the Gambia, but also addresses a lot of issues, administrative, operation that revolve around policing. It is really very important, and I've had time to not go thoroughly through the bill,
Bill.
but to skim through it. I was present on the first day of the validation, and that was day before yesterday, and to be quite honest, I am really very impressed as to the content of the bill and the progress it is making. I only do hope that after the validation, and then it goes on to the next step, it will eventually go through the process smoothly without being changed, without being watered down, without being doctored in any way, as has happened with our constitution, and then goes on to become a new police act. I mean, it would be really very good. The contents are very good, and believe me, if what was presented as a bill goes on to become the police act, you would definitely see greater changes in the shape and form and operation of the Gambia Police Force.
A lot of you, especially you and many of your colleagues recently, attended a lot of professional police training, across the country, across the region. Some, study in Turkey, and that is very impressive. Do you think that a professional police, is, accountable? Like, do you think that the professional policing is accountable to the Gambians? Like, now that we have a lot of professionals in the police, do you think this will help the Gambia police force in its reform drive?
Yes, yes, definitely. But we have to ask ourselves, what makes a professional police officer? You've mentioned training opportunities that some of us have had outside the Gambia, in Turkey, in Ghana, in other places as well. MK, when I first joined the Gambia Police Force, or even before joining it, I thought everybody who wears a uniform is an officer. But that is not really the case. When you are part of the security outfit apparatus, what we call the order ranks, that is from, let's say, the police, the constable, all the way down to the chief inspector, are the order ranks. Beyond the chief inspector is another layer, and that is the officer corps. That is starting from the assistant, now cadet assistant superintendent of police, to the inspector general. That is the officer corps. And in most cases, to get into the officer corps, it's not just, okay, you have been in the service for too long and now you have to be promoted. No, it's a process. I will liken it to this may be a bit. I liken it to being in our culture. If you are a male, before you transition into manhood, you have to undergo the circumcision or the circumcision rites process.
Right.
Okay, because it is only then, when you go there, then you will get taught of what it means for you to be a man, what it means for you to be a husband, what is your role as a man in the society, and then how to communicate. It teaches you a lot of things. And the same too applies in the security sector. To get into the officer corps, you need to be prepared, because that is the strategic level of the security. And if you do not have a proper understanding of that, you may wear a rank that is associated in the officer corps, but because you do not know what it means to be an officer, you are not really an officer. And unfortunately, that is one area that the Gambia needs to work on. I mean, the few officers that we have, whether in the military or in the police or in the immigration, whatever the security outfit may be, only became officers. I don't mean because they were in the rank. Those who have had the opportunity to undergo the training got it outside. The Gambia Police Force has been in existence since 1855. It's almost 200 years now. How is it that we do not even have a proper training school, talk less of a training college, to groom officers of their men and women? So that is a bit lacking. However, to make room for that, yes, we have had a lot of graduates enter the system. Okay, they are graduates in different fields, whether it's in political science, whether it's in development studies, whether it's in English languages, and so on and so forth, whether it's in law. Yes, those are professional degrees, but then the officer degree is lacking in most of them. And believe me, if you undergo an officer training, a proper officer training, you do not only become an officer, you become a gentleman and a lady. And if you have had that experience, believe me, the system or the political class will not manipulate you.
Absolutely.
And I dare say that let us do a survey of all those who have undergone proper officer training to see their record as to how they have behaved against against others. So it is very important. And I hope, as part of the sector reform process, there will be consideration of establishing an officers' college in the Gambia.
Absolutely. That's very fundamental, because why I ask you this, despite the fact that we have a lot of highly trained officers in the police force, there is still a mistrust, between the police and the citizens, so do you think that promotion should be based on merit or long service? Because a lot of people, recently we had complaints in the police hierarchy that some of the promotion are not merit based. What's your take on this?
It's whether they are based or not. I actually think promotion should be based on properly laid down policies. And it has to be on merit, of course. You cannot be promoted merely because you have been serving in a certain rank for long. I mean, each rank has a corresponding responsibility. If you are a sergeant, there are terms and reference, and your role as a sergeant are there. They should be clearly spelled out. Now, whether you have been, in a certain rank for too long, do you have the capacity to shoulder the responsibilities of the next rank? Do you have all those qualities that are required for you to be efficient and effective in carrying out your duties as a police officer or as a security officer. All of these things need to be looked at. It's not just merely of saying that, okay, this man has been loyal, he's hardworking here and there, and then we have to promote him because he has served in this position for long. You definitely have to merit a rank to undertake it. And I also think that promotion based on mere recommendations is not enough. And that is why you would have complaints of this kind of nature. If you had a laid out policy that is properly validated by the different stakeholders, and it's also adopted, and you use that as your guide to do promotions, I don't think you will have any form of challenges. But I quite agree with you. Promotions should be merit based.
David, just a quick question on this. We have seen that the Gambia police force during the time of ex-president Jammeh and also the Barrow government, there is a high level of politicization of the police. There is political influence. What do you think should be done to stop that and make the police professional, not to have political interference, like orders coming from the executive to the police chief to act on certain things? How do we stop that in a new democratic space where there is independence of the police to the executive?
I mean, Zedi, I want to ask this first. Has there been a time ever since the establishment of the Gambia Police was in 1855, that there hasn't been political interference in the way the police work? There has never been a time. Why was the police established in the first place by the colonialists? It was meant to serve the interests of the colonialists. They did not establish
not to maintain law and order as their primary
to maintain law and order. Whose law and order was it? They had an interest in the Gambia, and to protect those interests, they needed people with muscle to make sure that people did not rebel. And that was how it was established. And as it evolved, they make sure that the training, the psychology of police officers maintain that spirit of protecting the establishment. And the training regimes remained as those. And even after independence, that did not really change. You may have had some form of reform, but then did we experience reform in the training regime? No. Those who were training officers during the colonial regime, it's the same training regime that was followed. And even after the first the PPP government coming into the AFPRC and APRC, is the same training regime that was maintained. How comes that we hear things like civilians and we are security, you dirty civilian, and things like that? Because the training is such a way that it creates a you or us versus them mentality in security personnel. And you probably don't even realize this as you undergo the training, but then inadvertently it becomes part of you. And so you do everything. In fact, the whole program, the whole setup is such that you are always protecting the establishment, even though you are being told that your responsibility to the people, but then the working mechanics works the other way around. Okay? Now, the IGP until today continues to be appointed by the head of state, the president. So he can be hired and fired at any time. If you are my employee, who do I remain loyal to, really? And given the political history of the Gambia and the way things are, there is no guarantee that anybody will be made IGP and they remain loyal to the Gambian people over their employer. So, so for politics to not have influence over the workings of the security sector, that is where security sector reform is coming, where you at least create protection for the for security chiefs, and also make it not easy for them to be hired and fired, but also ensure that they are accountable, they have civilian oversight over them. And that is what the security sector reform is working towards achieving.
David, you talk about a very important, like how it will be difficult to avoid influence from the politicians who appoint the police chief. The 2020 CRC draft has provisions, whereas the appointment of the IGP or the Director General of the State Intelligence Agency, have to go through parliamentary process before confirmation. But now there is nothing like that because the draft has been changed severely. Do you think that Gambians need a system like that where the police chief go through a parliamentary approval before being appointed, to be the head of the Gambia police force from experience?
Yeah, for me, there should be some level of protection for the police chief, or director of SIS or whatever. There should be some level of protection where they can have some amount of, let's say, okay, I can be able to do my work without bias and not
Yeah.
fear of losing my job.
Yeah. And
If that
you will even see police chiefs coming in when they're appointed that, police is going to be neutral, they're going to be independent. This is what we're going to do. We'll hold everyone accountable. But going forward, looking at their actions, these are not in line with what they, said.
Well, there is some level of accountability. I think when it comes to changing, to reforming, I think the police, I mean, generally the security sector is making some progress. The only thing is that at operational level, we are seeing changes happening, but at strategic level, not much is changing simply because you know, all of these things that are happening are based on law. And our laws are taking cue from the Constitution. We are using the 1997
Right,
Constitution until
Constitution.
now. And until that changes and changes the dynamics, I mean, you don't expect much change. Okay. So even though that there is some bit of progress being made, how do we ensure that they are sustainable and they are progressive? They have to be backed by a constitution that provides for these changes. And unless that happens, it's going to be like the movement of pendulum. You make progress here, and then you move back. We'll just circumnavigate the same circumference and not really make much progress.
Yeah. You are engaged with the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, and then your role there is to help in the security sector reform. Do you think there have been any notable progress? Because there have been report of very slow level of progress with regards to the security sector reform.
Now, we must first understand what security sector reform is. I guess a lot of Gambians talk about security sector reform, but if you ask them what exactly is security sector reform, they will look at you like, I'm not so. So, for security sector reform, to put it simply, is the political and technical process of improving state human security by making security provision, management, and oversight more effective and more accountable within a framework of democratic civilian control, rule of law, respect for human rights. And the goal of SSR is to apply the principles of good governance to the security sector. We are talking about them becoming what? Within the framework of democracy,
Mhm.
civilian control, rule of law, and respect for human rights. I think if you look at these and then consider them as boxes, there is great improvement within the security sector. Now, we are talking about policies that would guide the operation. We are talking about SOPs. We are talking about laws that will ensure that these things remain sustainable. Yes, a lot of DCAF, GIZ, and many other stakeholders who are supporting in the security sector reform process have been supporting the Gambia, the security sector, the Gambia government in these reform processes, and a lot of work and a lot of investment has been made. A lot of work has been put into it. Gains have been made because yes, policy documents have been developed. Some acts, for example, the SIS, the NIA Act has been, has been changed. You have the Gambia Armed Forces Act has been changed. You have the Gambia Police Bill, also being worked on. The Gambia Immigration Department Bill is also, being worked on. So those are progresses that are being made. And apart from that, you have policies, policy documents that are being developed to support all of these things so that they will be sustainable. However, what I'm not seeing happen is these things being used as the mainstay of operations. So these policy documents are being developed, they are being presented to the institutions. They take them, they validate them. In fact, they develop them, they validate them, and they adopt them as working tools, but they don't really use them. And that is the challenge. That is the challenge right now. But I dare say, yes, progress is being made. I mean, these days, the National Assembly Standing Committee on Defense and Security calls on the IGP and he goes to respond. In the 22 years of the
it was non-existent before.
So they call on the Chief of Defense and he goes to respond. That is oversight. And we must commend those progresses. But I think a lot more needs to be made. But more important,
because I had a conversation with a security expert last week, and then he said it will be difficult to reform the security sector because those leading the reform process need to be reformed themselves. Do you agree with that?
Of course, reform includes everybody. I mean, it's not just the sector. Who are you reforming? It's the people who operate the sector. So they need to reform. I mean, you need reform. And like I said, if you are a security personnel who has not undergone the required professional training, how do you even recognize the need for reform? The thing is, your mind needs to be open. You need to see the bigger picture, to see the beauty of democratic control of armed forces, to see the beauty of oversight. I mean, we as human beings are not perfect. And that is why you need somebody to tell you, hold on, you are being, you are being excessive. You are going overboard. You need somebody to hold you in check. We all see what power does to the individual.
Yeah.
Policing has powers. When you are a soldier and then you have a gun, you have powers. You need somebody to remind you so that you don't go overboard. But you need to understand that you need that. So right now, the way things are, you have like I said, the Standing Committee on Defense is calling the IGP or the Chief of Defense Staff and things like that. But overall, what level of accountability and oversight do we have in the Gambia itself? Whether it's the security or whether it's the government or the public sector, what is the level of accountability? I mean, I consider our mechanics like a bicycle with different parts. For the pedal to function very well, the chain needs to be in good order. And each of the parts complements each other. If one is not functioning very well, I don't see how you expect the other to function well. So if we do not have the necessities that are needed to ensure that the police, for example, works well, you don't expect it to happen. It cannot happen outside a vacuum. If you do not have a constitution that backs the spirit of the necessary security sector reform, well, the reform itself may be a semblance of a reform, but in actual truth, it cannot stay sustainable. Right now, because you have international donors, international agencies, and organizations supporting it, sorry, it will seem that we're going. But if we do not have the necessary tools to make sure that those things are embedded and now become part of us once they leave, we may roll back to what was prevailing.
Absolutely. For those joining us, this is the big interview with me, David Kujabi, talking about the security sector reform and modern policing. David Kujabi, you are I would call you an accomplished author. You have 2 books under your belt. You just recently, authored the After the Badge and the Chain and the Amulet. Can you tell us about these books, because it looked like they are more about security sector and your police in career? Tell us about these books.
Okay, let me start with The Chain and the Amulet. The Chain and the Amulet is a book I wrote as way back in 2003, even before going to university. I've always had a passion for writing, and I thought maybe I would just, write something, a story of my own. And well, the chain and the amulet is quite interesting because it is a fiction
Mhm.
fused with fact. Now, when I started writing the story, it is set in the 1980s of the Gambia. Then I realized that if I am writing a story that is set in the Gambia in 1980s, a major event happened here in the Gambia, and that is the 1981 coup d'etat. So it would be a miss if I do not include. So I decided to go through research on the 1981 coup d'etat, and I got really, really interesting things on it. So, well, one aspect of the story is talking about Satu, a young girl who, on the
Mhm.
day of her naming ceremony, got betrothed to an elderly person. Satu, well, through the benevolence of her betrothed husband, whom she did not know about, went to school and she excelled in school. But in high school, she met this handsome young man of her age, or school, and they fell in love. But unfortunately, Satu and this guy Satu actually fell in love with this guy, Lamin, who is actually the son of her benefactor, her betrothed husband. So that was a clash. But apart from that, I also created the character of Lang.
Mhm.
Lang was from the same village with Satu, and well, he was somewhat of a violent man. And
Mhm.
he ended up in Mile 2 around 1981. And in 1981, during the coup, the jail was broken into, and well, the convicts, the prisoners, escaped, and some of them took part in the coup. So through the eyes of Lang, I narrated some happenings of the 1981 coup. But the most interesting part for me was this: when the Senegalese troop came into the Gambia and Kukoy was forced to flee,
Mhm.
he fled through Katong. And when he went to Katong, there were some youths he met there at the river. And there was this gentleman who helped to sneak them out of the country through a boat. And this gentleman joined them from Katong. So, what a lot of people did not know from what happened to Kukoy after the coup, this man was able to tell me. He is late, he's of blessed memory, but he told me what happened when they left Katong. They went to Guinea-Bissau first. They were in Guinea-Bissau for 8 months, and pressure, yeah, Jawara was putting pressure on Nino Vieira to have them repatriated to Gambia. So they had to move out, and they went to Cuba. They went to Cuba because Cuba, as you know, was supporting revolutions back then. But in Cuba also, they couldn't stay long enough because Kukoy continued to have a desire to rule the Gambia. So, in following his interest, he moved from Cuba to Libya, and that is where they started the guerrilla warfare training, and how some of them eventually joined Charles Taylor and the rebels in the Liberia War. So, I was able to give a narration as to who these people were and how they went through these times, and yeah. So that is an interesting part of it. So you have one aspect of the book talking about the culture of the Gambia, the challenges of early marriage, the challenges of a polygamous home, about school life back then.
Mhm.
School life back then. I talked about a chapter has to do with excursions. We don't have much of those now when
Mhm.
schools twins with other schools and go on long excursions and things like that. And a whole lot of interested in. And then we also have this aspect of this political turmoil that happened in 1981. So that's about it on the chain and the amulet. And the other one after the badge.
Yes.
After the badge is the full title is After the Badge, My
After.
Experiences and Reflections as a Police Officer. When you look at it, you would think I am actually talking about myself. But for me, the book is not so much about myself. It was me using my experiences to make an analysis of the Gambian security sector. And I've had really interesting chapters in the book. For example, I looked at my recruitment training.
Mhm.
How does the recruitment training we undergo in the Gambia shape the police officer? When you look at recruits in the Gambia, I don't think you like them, do you?
Yeah, yeah, they look so malnourished and poor.
Yes. And if you go to the training school, what kind of training do you undergo? How are you treated? I mean, police officers are supposed to be gentlemen and ladies, but the training that you undergo to does it really shape you as such? I
Mhm.
mean, you undergo through a lot of punishment, if you like, call it torture, unnecessary torture. Meanwhile, these are people you are training to come out and protect the civilian populace. And then the training that they are going through involves torture, beating, punishment, and you call it you are shaping them into discipline of police officers. How does that? And you expect these people to come out of the training school and start treating suspects civilly when they have not got civil.
Treatment at the training school.
So yeah, I looked into that also, and I delved into the history of how the Gambia Police Force was established by the
Colonialist.
British colonialists and their interests, and how that is still affected because it is safe to to protect the establishment. I talked about that somewhat. I also talked about my training experience in Ghana. That actually saved me into the officer I became. If I have not undergone that training, I wouldn't know the difference between other ranks and officer. And probably the challenges that I was able to surmount as PRO, I probably wouldn't have, challenged them. So yes, I think the officer training I got before I became PRO was what contributed
See,
immensely in me being able to carry out my job and maintain my integrity throughout. So I talked
absolutely.
about that as well. I've also talked about politics and the police. You know, already in our discussions, we've talked about political influence in policing. A whole chapter is dedicated on that and how the powers vested on the presidency, to appoint the IGP, makes the IGP vulnerable to them. I've talked about that. And if I looked at, I mean, saying, let me tell you an interesting fact. In 2011, I did some bit of search and realized that from 1994 to 2011 alone, there were
Mhm.
up to 12 IGPs.
IGP.
Yes, there are up to 12 IGPs, some serving as short stint as 2 months, some less than a year. I mean, if you are an IGP of an institution of a police
Mhm.
force, and you are not able to serve less than more than 1 year, 2 years
Yeah.
or so, what kind of reforms, what kind of achievement would you have done there? So even that in itself, the fact that for 12 years the president could move people in, out, in, out, in, out, and even bring in people who were not part of mainstream policing to become the IGP,
IGP.
that is beset with problems of its own. So those things are challenges. And yes, I think there is need to hold those things in check to provide some bit of protection for security heads. Yeah, so I did talk about that as well, and I talked about the need for security sector reforms and esprit de corps and things like that. So yes, that the book delves. I really recommend this book for Gambians, especially those in the security sector, the police especially, because I know it will resonate with them and especially young officers who are joining in. I tried to be brutally honest, and I think it will be help them a lot in shaping them to become good officers.
David, you also serve in the United Nations Peacekeeping Mission in Sudan. How does this experience shape you to be the officer you are? Because a lot of people have a lot of admiration for your work as a very professional police officer. But this goes without saying that you have also had a lot of training, both regionally and internationally. How does the peacekeeping operation in Sudan shape your view of the police, generally?
To put it bluntly, the experience in peacekeeping operations in Sudan, therefore, especially, had been a serious awakening for me. You know, when we were talking about going on peacekeeping, I did not, at least I mean, quite understand what it actually meant. We know that, okay, Darfur was war ravaged, and so we were some kind of officers, good people. We are in the green, blue beret to go and bring them peace. But when I got there, I saw what I experienced and learned was different. That
Mhm.
is why, MK, whatever conflicts we may have in the Gambia, we must
Mhm.
do everything possible not to allow it result into violence.
Mhm.
What happened in Darfur, and until today, Sudan is not able to gain peace because one day a group of people got up and
Mhm.
went to started a war.
Yeah,
It's been how many years now? Sudan is
almost,
still in war.
yeah,
Whether
two,
it's
two.
Darfur or whatever, Sudan is still in war. They are still struggling to find peace. So if you have peace, try as much as possible not to lose them. And because of my experiences, I knew that as a peacekeeper in Darfur, I did not so much bring peace. I may have said, okay, I contributed here and there. We brought about these changes overall, but we went there to bring peace. Is there
Mm.
peace? For
No.
me, that's the question I
The-
asked. So and because I wanted to understand the dynamics of peace, I sought a scholarship to go and study peace. So my master's was in peace, conflict, and development, and now my passion is promoting peace. And if you have been following me, you will see that every other time I talk about early warning, early warning signs as to what could endanger our peace in the Gambia. So I write some of these stuff, I highlight some of these stuff, and I think we are navigating a very tricky, slippery ground, and Gambians must be really very conscious and careful. And I want to urge the government, especially, to be cognizant of some of these small things. There are a lot of things that are happening now. If we do not hold them in check, it may endanger the peace we have. So yes, the experience in Darfur gave me a first-hand experience of what violence could mean, and so I want that Gambia never you know, reverts to violence ever. So we have a beautiful country with beautiful people. We must not lose that by any means.
from someone who witnessed war at first hand as a peacekeeper. David Kujabi, the adequate resources and infrastructure have always been a challenge for the Gambia police force. Sometimes, they will complain about resources, How do you think the security sector reform will address these issues of inadequate and infrastructure of the Gambia police force?
I think you know there always will be inadequacies. We just have to learn to work smarter. The Gambia is a poor country, and the investment into the security sector is not very big. I mean, the budget that goes to the security sector is not very large. And because of the overall budget of the Gambia, we don't expect that to shift much. We are
Mhm.
undergoing security sector reform. What I want to see happen is the proper, adequate training of Gambia security personnel. Believe me, what I see as happening in our training is not enough. Okay, one, you have to make sure that in the recruitment you recruit competent personnel that you can transform into professional police officers. So the recruitment process should be rigorous. For you to enter the police force or any security sector, um, you must make sure that the laid down requirements are followed to the letter. Okay, we have had a university in the Gambia for so many years now. I don't see why we should recruit grade 9
Yeah.
into the security sector.
So meaning there should be a standard of recruitment,
There
to
should
make
be
the
a very good standard of the security because we are talking about law enforcement. You are talking about protecting human lives. You need somebody who is level-headed to be able to do that without infringing on the rights of the person. So the training also have to make sure that it saves you in understanding these things properly. And you must be level-headed to be able to understand this. And then, given the policy documents that are being developed now through the security sector reform, if these things are ingrained in the security personnel from training, and they understand that these are what I am supposed to work with, you'll see that even with meager resources, there would be changes. We have always said that community policing is our greatest working tool. The Gambian community is very supportive to the security sector. If you call out to them for information, for support, they would always come out. We need to leverage that even better. We need to leverage that even better. And if we do, I am pretty sure we'll see greater changes. That said, though, we also need to invest into modern day, policing or security tools. You cannot have police officers manning the roads all over the place. That is, it's we technology is advancing. Why can't we have surveillance cameras, speed cameras manning our roads, so that some of the personnel that are you keep standing on the road there could be placed somewhere? So we need to look into all of these things. I am pretty sure that all of these things are being looked into, but it requires concerted effort and the support of every Gambian to make sure that they happen. I know it is slow paced. I know the authorities are doing what they can, but it's not going to stop us from saying that a lot more needs to be done.
David, the police always play, a crucial role in terms of protection, safety, law and order. But recently, there has been a lot of mistrust between the police and the public. What do you think might be the cause, and how do we bridge that mistrust between the police and the citizen, or let's say generally between the security forces, including the police, the army? Because we have seen, instances where civilians are taking the law into their own hand by even beating officers on duty, and there is a high level of mistrust among them.
Seni, I don't want to look at this from only one angle, let's say the security sector. If I can ask you, which sector in the Gambia is trusted right now? I have likened our mechanics to a bicycle where each part has a corresponding responsibility or complements the other. If one is not functioning very well, there is no way the other will function well. It's going to struggle. And so our overall, we are facing challenges in every sector, including the security sector, the police as well. So I think after 2017, Gambians have had a lot of hopes that we would transcend where we are today. But our progress has been snail paced. And so the frustration is taken out on people. Now, when it comes to the criminal justice system, it is the police you see first.
Yeah.
So it's the police who are out there enforcing the law and making sure that there is law and order. So it is the police who approaches the community. So the community is facing the police. So their frustration, even if general, is vented on the person who they see first. And in most cases, is the police. Like I said, yes, the police has its challenges, but all the other sectors have challenges. If we must evolve, if we must do better, every sector needs to do better.
Absolutely. Every sector need to do better. And how do we ensure that we have a complete security sector reform, in line with the best practices? Because the reform has been so slow, as you said. The reforms take place since 2017, and it's 7 years now since those reforms, from the constitutional building process to the truth-seeking process. All these processes are slow. David, what do you think might lead to the slow implementation of these transitional justice processes?
I don't know if I have the right answer, but I want to ask this. Who decided on the transitional process for Gambia? Was it something that was generally discussed by Gambia? Did we sit down as Gambians, just Gambians, to say that, okay?
Yeah, some of the processes, like the constitutional building processes, Gambians were consulted from
No,
day one.
not that. The constitutional building process is part of the transitional justice.
Transitional justice process, right.
So you have the Jani Commission,
Yeah.
the CRC, the
The
Security
Truth
Sector
Commission.
Reform, the TRRC. All of these things are part of the transition process. I am asking, how did we, the architecture of this transition process?
It's the coalition government,
Yeah, well, okay. What I'm asking is, after the change of government, did we sit back and say, okay, we have now got rid of Jammeh. How do we make progress going forward? If we are going to go under a transition, what shape and form do we want our transition to take place? And I think because we have not thought that out, and all of a sudden, international agencies, international organizations are coming up with, okay, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, and NDP was developed, and here and there, money was there for grabbing. I don't think we actually took time and asked ourselves, what exactly does Gambia need? And after we have actually embraced all of these things, and then we got into them, issues started coming up. And so I am thinking, because there are sticking points, it is making progress really slow. Because now politics is coming into play. We are undergoing reforms that would affect people who are now within the corridors of power. How can I make reforms of things that will actually affect me? So, I mean, it's a tricky affair, but for me, I don't think we actually sat as Gambians and thought of what we or how we want to progress after Jammeh, like happened in after independence. After independence in 1965, and then we took over power from the colonialists. What change did we really make that was different from what how the colonialists ruled us? We were excited to have independence, but then what was our path through independence? I dare ask, if anybody wants to challenge me on that, what is the Gambian identity? What makes you a Gambian, Sani? I'm not asking you to quote me what the constitution says you are a Gambian. When you meet a Senegalese and you ask them, your land Galafane Senegalese, so say you're communal Gainde.
Yeah, and Gambia is different. You ask him, he will say, I'm a Mandinka. So the level of patriotism.
I'm a Jola, I'm from Fonyi. And we have a tendency of profiling each other. When Gambians wait for the first time, we ask each other our names. We actually profiling each other. And that is a system that was brought in by the British. We have not evolved from that. That is why the lack of identity, the national identity of a Gambian, is also contributing for us, finding it difficult to dialogue and come to a consensus. It's difficult to bring Gambians together.
So you want to say there is lack of sense of nationalism and pride in Gambianism, like Gambians identify themselves based on tribe instead of based on the country itself.
Tribe, religion, region, and so on.
And even societal standing, like
yes, of course.
Rich family.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think the only time that Gambians really came together and fight collectively was in 2016. And that has been lost again. I hope someday we will be able to see everything for Gambia as Gambians and not individually.
David, from your conversation, I noticed that the missing point is we got it wrong at 2027. Can we undo that?
I can't say we got it. I can't say we got it wrong. I think it was very clear in 2016 when we are going into elections what we wanted.
Yeah.
We didn't get it wrong.
No, I mean the
question is, did we maintain the paths we designed
together,
or did we shift lanes? I don't have an answer to that. I mean,
I have an answer to it. We shift lane, and that's where we are facing these problems right now.
Well, there you go.
We are almost at the tail end of this interview with David Kujabi, the former police spokesperson, here with me live from Banjul. David, are we seeing you going back to the police? A lot of people want to see a very professional police officer like David back to the police. Are we seeing you going back to the police to continue the good work you have started?
I'm saying I'm still a police officer, so I've not resigned.
You have not resigned. Okay.
I'm only on secondment, and well, let's see what happens. I'm only on secondment. My secondment lasts only 6 years. It's 4 years now, I have 2 or a little under 2 more years to go, and I'll have to make a choice as to whether I will return to the police or not.
Okay.
Let me just say this. I love the police job.
Police.
Believe me. I mean, it was destiny that brought it to me, and it was the police that shaped the person you are seeing and hearing today. So
And
I owe
no regret serving the Gambia Police Force now.
not one bit, and I would definitely want to continue serving the police force, because there is nothing that gives me greater joy than
Yes.
feeling that yes, I am contributing in protecting the lives and property of Gambia and ensuring security. I would want to continue on that. But I want to say this. I would want that on a platform and an environment that makes it possible for me to be able to do it and be able to champion human security in the Gambia.
Absolutely. David, finally, before I let you go, we are almost at the end of this interview. Recently, we have seen private individuals donating, to the Gambia Police Force and also building police station. What did the law say about private citizens building police station for police officers? Is that
I'm not
is
so sure about what the law says, but
yeah.
like I mentioned earlier, we thrive largely on community policing, and community policing calls for coordination, cooperation, and partnership between the police and and the members of the public. We have mentioned here that the police is under, it doesn't have a budget that can,
Sources, yeah.
yeah. So receiving support from individuals and even organizations, it's quite welcome. We, however, have
Yeah, yeah,
to.
this beg the question of independence and neutrality. That's why I asked this question whether the law allowed private individual or entities to support police or build police stations.
I'm not, like I said again, I'm not sure what the law says. So if you are going to ask me based on the law, I won't be able to give you a proper answer.
But
But what
morally,
I
you think
want to,
that's correct?
it is challenging, and it's very true that it could pose challenges of neutrality and and not being biased, especially if those philanthropists or sponsors are called to question with regarding the law. But
Absolutely.
what I can tell you is this: I have no doubt that whether you have spent millions on the police or not, and you break the law is not going to recognize your benevolence to the police. The law is going to be the law, and it will be served on you accordingly.
Absolutely. Many thanks for those joining in. This is the big interview with me, Seni Marena. In the studio is Mr. David Kujabi, an accomplished author and a former spokesperson of the Gambia Police Force. David Kujabi, many thanks for joining us on this conversation.
Many thanks to you too, Zane. It seems our lives are so much somehow woven. When I first became PRO in 2012, you were the first journalist
Yes,
to interview me. And
yes,
today, 14 years on, we are here having this conversation. I just want to
absolutely.
say that we have both grown, we have evolved, and
Yeah,
we have both in our various ways contributed to our country. And I
yeah,
want to commend your role, your contributions, and everything you are doing for this country. Your
yeah.
passion is positively infectious, and I want to encourage that you maintain your humility, maintain your passion, and then continue doing what you keep doing. What I just
Absolutely.
want to, what I just want to advise is that always see Gambia first.
Yeah,
Always see Gambia
absolutely.
first in whatever you do. I thank you, and I give you a police salute for your contribution.
And then I'm also gonna give you a promotion before you go, because a lot of people are watching and we are live on YouTube too. A lot of people are asking how much is your book, and then how they can access your book. So you might want to say something to those who want to get
Yes.
a copy of your books.
So the after the bite is costing $600, and you can grab a copy from Timbuktu. If you are in Banjul, you can grab a copy from the police headquarters in Banjul. And
Mhm.
if you are somewhere close to Westfield, you can get it from Cisco. Cisco is between St. Teresa's Upper Basic School and St. Teresa's primary school. Also, if you call the numbers on the flyer, you can get it 3462508. If you call it, we'll facilitate you to get a book. The the chain and the amulet is costing $700. I tried to make the books cheap enough so that Gambians would access it.
Absolutely. For those who want to get Mr. Kujabi's books, please liaise with him. That brought us to the end of this interview with David Kujabi. David, as I said, many thanks for your time and joining us in this very important discussion. Do have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Husseini. Thank you so much.